All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our February I Am Tech Oregon interview, sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. Before we begin our event today, we want to acknowledge the Indigenous land on which TAO is headquartered. The Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes. I invite us all to take a minute to thank the original caretakers of this land and reflect on our place in the history of this area. And as our friends at PDX WIT say, genocide is a complicated historical incident that cannot be summed up in a minute-long event or a minute-long intro at an event. And it's our hope to draw attention to the opportunities that exist when it comes to acknowledging the history and supporting the future of Indigenous Oregonians. My name is Ruthie, and I'm the Marketing and Regional Programs Coordinator for this series, the I Am Tech Oregon series. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm just super lucky to have the opportunity to get to know some of our amazing members throughout this series and to help them amplify their stories. Today, I'm joined by two members of TAO's team, Justin Martinez and Kara Snow. Justin is our events guru, and Kara is our community, kind of the person who's going to keep us hyped up in the chat. We're all Zoom etiquette experts at this point, but just in case, here are a few guidelines before we get started. Everyone's been muted as they join the call, so please remain on mute unless a TAO staff member unmutes you. You may ask or respond to questions in the chat box by directing your message to Kara, the hype leader, and she'll be monitoring the chat box throughout to make sure all your questions get answered. And if you're feeling excited and you want to support our guests, we encourage you to use the participant icon on your screen to applaud or give a thumbs up throughout the presentation. And the half hour is going to go by very quickly, but we have allotted time at the end for a live audience Q&A using Mentimeter. And so we will reshare these access details at that time, but you'll be able to access the Q&A by scanning this QR code or visiting menti.com and using the vote code. But don't worry, we'll reshare this again. Please engage with us on social media. It's my job to monitor TAO's social media, and I love when attendees share takeaways from our events. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Yalda Moshiri and Shahrzad Vossoughi. Thank you so much, the co-founders of SAF. Thanks so much for being here today, ladies. We're really excited to learn more about both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and as we've already mentioned, you two are the co-founders of SAF. Can you share more about what SAF is and how you became co-founders?
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is Yalda. I'm happy to share a little bit of background with you guys. So SAF in Farsi actually means queue or line, and Shahrzad and I share an Iranian background, and so we really wanted to kind of give a nod to our culture and our heritage and our backgrounds with the name of our company. The whole idea kind of came to be because I was working at Amazon in Seattle and was transitioning to move down to Portland. And one weekend I wanted to go have brunch. It was like a Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And I called this restaurant that I'd never gotten to have pancakes at, that was famous for their pancakes. And I was like, hey, how long's the wait for two people? And they were like 2.5 hours. And I kind of had heard that so many times as a frequent diner of like, oh, it's an hour wait just for some eggs, or it's 2 hours for dinner because we're busy and we don't take reservations. And I don't know, something about that morning in particular ignited me. And I posted on social media, asking if other people would be willing to pay for someone else to wait in line for them or to put their name on a wait list. And of my 500 friends, followers on Instagram, over 70% responded yes. So I got a very quick data pool of people who were interested in this. So I started asking more questions of how much would they pay and, things like that. And one of the people who responded was Shahrzad. And she's like, I experienced this. I have 2 kids. I feel like my date nights are ruined. Can we, chat about this idea? Because I've thought about it before. And so it was kind of serendipitous. I was moving down to Portland. She was already here. She liked the idea. She also comes from a very entrepreneurial background. Her family founded Ziba Design here in Portland. And she's also a small business owner herself. And with my background in co-founding a hardware startup in the Bay Area and just kind of coming from big corporate, it was the right opportunity for us to start building something together. So that's kind of how it came to be.
Very cool. I definitely relate to that, like Portlandia, there's like that skit where they're standing in line for 17 hours or whatever. That's such a real experience here.
Yeah,
Makes
definitely.
a lot of sense. So I'm curious, since the pandemic hit, how has it affected staff? How has it affected your business? And what have you been up to in the past year now that people aren't really standing in line for brunch?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to scale it back a bit. We were lucky enough to be a part of the PI cohort last year. And so we were, in a real building mode and had a lot of momentum. We were ramping up beta testing in Portland. We were preparing to raise funds. And then COVID hit. Everything shut down. And we thought, it's going to be temporary. We waited out, especially because our business, the initial offering was, we'll wait in line at popular no reservations restaurants. And we had partnered with concierges of local hotels like the Nines to use our product when they had guests in town. So obviously all that just, stopped. So when we realized we were in it for the long haul, we really used that time to reflect and see like what wasn't working for us. So we were working with an agency in Munich to help develop our app. And needless to say, there were a lot of different issues that we had encountered with them. And so it gave us some time to amicably part ways with them and really hunker down and find an amazing CTO, which we were lucky enough to do. And Pete, who's our CTO, came on in October. And so that was great to have that opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, between March and October, we had a non-functioning app, and we were trying to figure out, what's the need right now. Obviously, there are no lines at restaurants, but we were seeing reports in New Jersey with 6-hour DMV lines. People in New York with long COVID testing lines. So we were trying to put together a short-term solution, and I put together a no-code app. But with the marketplace, with our app being a marketplace platform, it was really difficult to kind of put that together on a no-code app, and it proved to be very clunky. But we were just kind of trying different avenues to kind of, find our way back and see what would be the next steps in our business. So we've had to pivot to meet those circumstances. We're, going to be relaunching here on the East Coast, in more of the densely populated cities, and really focus on the essential service verticals. So that's what we've been up to, and that's how it's affected our business.
Wow, it's super interesting to hear how people have been kind of innovating and just all the ways that businesses have had to adapt and shift during the pandemic. Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, so as two female entrepreneurs, do you both see yourself represented among your peers? What's that experience been as startup founders?
There's definitely more of us than there was 6-7 years ago when I first entered the startup world. I remember in 2014 when I started to launch my hardware startup, I would go to the pitches with VCs, with angels, and I would pretty much be the only female who was sitting as like a co-founder on some of these teams. And it was hard because it didn't really even make sense at that time for me to present the business ideas or to pitch. What's been wonderful about Portland is how much we embrace diversity, and being a part of PI, for instance, or what was Women Led, which is now Accelerate, is seeing the representation of females grow so much more than it was even several years ago. It's not only rare to be a female founder, it's extremely rare to be two female co-founders. With that comes a little bit of bias, unfortunately. I'm very grateful, and I'm really happy that we are in such good company with the women that we're surrounded with who are also pursuing their endeavors, but it doesn't come short of its own biases. And what I like to share with people about that when they ask that question is, we feel like we have to prove ourselves a little bit more at the get-go of conversations. And we've had to do kind of a lot of A/B testing in our conversations when we meet folks of like, what's really sticking? How are we representing ourselves? And what that really means is we start our conversations with our backgrounds and kind of legitimize ourselves of, we've worked here, we've done this, this is what we're pursuing, this is what our endeavor is, versus, kind of starting off with the idea and not really being taken seriously until they understand, oh, these folks actually have the know-how and the knowledge to be successful at this. So it's an interesting time. It's definitely, I think we all just need to pull together and help each other succeed. And that's what Shahrzad and I are all about. Like, how can we help? How can we bring everyone up together?
Yeah, I feel like we have a pretty amazing community of women in tech here in Portland. And that's been one of my favorite ways to get involved with TAO, just kind of generally just working with each other to kind of boost each other and help amplify each other's voices. So this kind of relates, we ask everyone this question when they come on I Am Tech Oregon. Have you ever had imposter syndrome?
Yes, absolutely. For me, I'm a daughter of immigrant parents, and I was raised being told I could do anything, be anything that I put my mind to. And I always dreamt, big. But any achievement that I attained, I had this tendency to quickly retreat because I thought I wasn't good enough, especially because what I was aiming for, I didn't see many people that looked like me or, in any of those roles. And for a perfectionist, because I am a perfectionist, that's hard because I didn't take the typical path to going to a particular school or having XYZ experience under my belt. So in my mind, if I felt like if I didn't do those particular things, then I didn't belong. So it took me, really many years to realize that, that it's okay, after hearing countless stories from podcasts or other interviews of people who actually, did look like me. As Yalda said, it's been more recent where we see more female entrepreneurs, more immigrant entrepreneurs on the big stages and talking about their stories. So once those, stories started sprouting, I realized that if you're going to get anywhere in life, you just have to do it. And it's okay if you don't have that traditional path. And it helped me realize that, I've always been where I need to be. I was just as qualified and competent then as I am now. So it's taken some time, but it's really hearing others' stories that help me kind of push that aside and grow from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just hearing about other people. I mean, I think that that's a big part of what we're trying to do with this series is just the more you hear people who don't normally get to share their stories and, aren't kind of the most like the typical kind of white male CEO of tech companies, I think the more it just normalizes all of these experiences of others. Awesome. What about what got you both into launching a startup? Do you have insights like what was good, bad, ugly? What's the experience been of launching a startup?
Yeah, I think I'm crazy. It takes a lot of like determination and willpower to decide to start something on your own, whether it's big or small, no matter what your ambitions are. I never wanted to own my own business, to be completely transparent. I got my degree in design. I thought I wanted to climb the ladder and become a creative director. And I did all of that. And I got to work for some really amazing companies and leave a great footprint with customers. But at some point in 2014, I was approached about launching a hardware startup, which what you all know now as AirPods was an industry my team and I invented and started back then. We invented the first truly wire-free earbuds. And so, it was this huge undertaking, but I felt like I'd had enough relevant experiences at the time to help get a brand established and communicate with customers from digital channels. But I didn't have experience in PR. I didn't have experience in business operations or managing an technical engineering team. There was so much I didn't know how to do, and I had to learn it from scratch, right? So the good and the bad and the ugly that comes with being an entrepreneur or a founder is it's like getting a free education in some sense, but depending on where your funding is coming from, like if you bootstrapped it as I have traditionally, it's also a very expensive education. And there's times where you're completely pulled through the ringer, and there's times where you see yourself on top. And I remember what it felt like to be featured in Forbes or Popular Science. I also remember what it felt like where we had to scramble and figure out how were we going to pay our employees because we were running out of runway. And those aren't things anyone can teach you. Those are just gambles that you take, and you kind of shoot in the dark and you hope that something's going to happen and you're going to be successful. And that victory is so sweet. And once you get that taste of it, you just want more. It's so incredible to impact people and change their lives, whether it's from an employee level or from a product level. And so I think becoming an entrepreneur is just I'm trying to think of the best way to share this with you. I think it's one of the best endeavors that you could choose to take on for yourself, but you also have to know that it comes with the whole breadth of experience underneath an umbrella. It's going to be stormy, it's going to be sunny, it's going to be rainy, it's going to be hail. Like, you're going to get the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. It's just like open yourself up to all of the parts of the experience.
You're going to feel all the feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your short-term goals for SAF? What are you thinking like for the rest of 2021?
Well, we're currently in the process of hiring a marketing intern and kind of having like a launch team for our, in preparation for our beta launch in New York. We're also back to preparing to raise capital so that we can, fuel hyper growth once we launch in New York. We're also closely watching how life post-COVID evolves. We know that once the majority of the population is vaccinated, people are going to be flocking to do the things that they once loved to do, like go to restaurants or travel, go to concerts and tourism, and lines will be everywhere. So we're just in preparation, getting prepared for that.
Yeah, I know I'm ready to support restaurants as much as I possibly can as soon as we're able to do that safely. So yeah, I think there's going to be some eager customers for sure. What about long-term? So you've talked a little bit about, getting started on the East Coast, looking for high density cities. What are the long-term goals for that?
Yeah, I think Shahrzad spoke a little bit about what we've seen kind of with the pandemic. And yeah, we absolutely decided to look inward over the past year and say, what's working for us, what's not. And coming back to, that whole entrepreneurial journey, it was tough last year, right? When you've completely pulled everything together and you're ready to open your raise and you're ready to launch, your product in different areas. And then you're like, Oh, I guess not. So yeah, we basically at that point decided we needed to part ways with our partners in Germany. We needed to reevaluate where our business needs were actually going to be, what channels, how's the pandemic actually affecting marketplaces. And so when it comes to long term, what we've seen is marketplaces are huge. Um, Even the Ubers of the world have found a way to survive, and they've acquired other businesses. The food delivery marketplaces have grown tremendously. There's been a demand for that, and lines have grown tremendously. So previously, where we had conversations with folks of like, are long lines and wait times really a thing? Those folks have now seen it firsthand this past year, because those long lines may not have been at restaurants, but they've been at the grocery stores, at IKEA, at Costco, at the DMV, you know, like all those verticals. So what was low hanging fruit for us in the beginning with restaurants has now converted to life post pandemic or during the pandemic, which is the essential businesses that can't, you know, that will continue to have the lines, especially with the limited capacity. So for us, long term, it's we want to be there once everyone feels ready to travel again, right? Because that's a huge marketplace for us of tourist attractions and the restaurants. So we want to be there and be ripe for that. But we also want to continue to service the industry as it stands. So how can we be there for the Department of Motor Vehicles and other government services? How can we be there for those continued limited capacity grocery stores or restaurants? Because it is going to be incremental change. It's not going to be overnight change. And so we think once we have our app rebuilt with our new CTO, Pete, who is just incredible. And once we do some incremental growth with our street team in New York City and our marketing intern, then we'll be ready to look at opening our raise again in the next quarter or two and trying to get the runway that we need to re-amplify ourselves, because it's like starting over. And one of my favorite things that I ever heard someone say was, you know, don't try to be something you're not, and don't be afraid of failure. Be a cockroach, like don't die, right? Like try everything you can before you close the doors. And that's what we're doing. Like we still really believe in our business. We still really believe in ourselves, and we're still learning, and we see an opportunity. So we're going to continue to be cockroaches. Like we're not done yet. We still have things to prove.
I love that. It's like the most resilient animal out there, right? You can adapt to any sort of setting. That's
totally.
All right. Well, we're going to move it over to live Q&A now for any folks from the audience who have questions. So Justin's going to put our Mentimeter QR code up, and you can go ahead and either scan the QR code with your phone, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code 4592300. So we'll get that going. It'll take us just a minute. But in the meantime, I have a question. I know that for Yalda and Shahrzad, there was in November, there was like, I saw some stuff on social media about like using staff to stand in line at polling places. Is that something that y'all think that you'll do in the future for future elections?
That was 100% the credit. I got to give all that credit to Shahrzad. She was very passionate about this. She really wanted to make sure folks who were underrepresented had the ability to have access to the voting polls. And we actually ended up having some really great conversations. We met with the CMO of Foot Locker, who was also helping kind of get more votes out there through his stores, who wanted to do something with us. We actually ended up meeting with Pharrell Williams' team on a project that he's working on, where they were actually implementing a street team of volunteers as well to help get more folks to the voting polls. And so, you know, these things, we know there's opportunity for us, and we just need the right timing and the right runway and the right support, and we can accelerate to support more of these types of endeavors, because there's nothing sweeter than, you know, when a mom comes to you and they say, like, you know, can you stand in line for me for my kid's ballet recital, because the grandparents like can't stand for like 3 hours, but we want good seats and then we want them to make it. There's nothing sweeter than the dad that comes to us and says, my son has a handicap, a disability. I can't stand in line at the DMV for 2 hours because of his condition. Like, can you help me with this?
Mhm.
So any way that we can help be there for folks and either help them maximize their time or alleviate some sort of stress or pain point for them, like that's what this is all about. Like, it's just helping each other.
Mhm. All right, so we have some questions that have come in, and if we don't get to these all, we'll make sure to email them, or Yalda and Shahrzad can answer them, and then we'll send it out with the feedback, the event feedback email. But we'll start with this question that says, funding for women is low to begin with, and 2020 has led VCs to invest with the familiar kind of white men. How are you approaching your fundraising strategy?
Very carefully. Look, I have to put blinders on when it comes to things like that. And it's not trying to be ignorant, it's just trying to be fact-based. And my approach is, how can I get the right data behind me to have a powerful conversation? So I'm not going to go into a room with investors who, one, don't take me seriously, or two, don't appreciate my background. And when I say my, I mean our, like, right? Like, it's my team.
Mhm.
I think it's very important for you to know who you're going to be exchanging money with, because those are long-term relationships that you're building and establishing. Um, so part of the reason we haven't opened our we've been previously is because we want to find the right partners who are in this with us long term. So it's a combination of making sure that I have, you know, my shit together from a business standpoint of like, what are our numbers? What's our data? What's actually viable for us to be asking for in exchange for the equity? Um, and if those numbers are strong, then I have a really strong case to present when it comes to those pitches. And then who am I actually pitching to? And do
Mhm.
I want to build that relationship with them? So I try to, you know, not think about whether it's that I'm a female. I try to think about, do I have a viable business model? And am I speaking with people who value what I'm bringing to the table? Because it's a business endeavor together.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we really spent a lot of time over the last, I mean, well, last year was kind of, you know, non-existent, but the year before that, you know, really building relationships with people up and down the coast, the West Coast, and really kind of nurturing those relationships and keeping in touch with those people, and in hopes of, you know, starting those conversations again. And most people seem to be continue to be excited, even more so now than in the past. So that's you know, that's the key, I think, is those relationships that we have built in the past as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, build relationships, get to know them, take those investors out to coffees and lunches, or do Zoom meetings, or whatever the new norm is, because it's not, hey, I need 25K. It's, hey, like, this is who I am. Who are you? Right? Like, it's just like dating. It's totally bizarre. It takes time. You have to earn trust with one another. And that's
Mhm.
our approach.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up, and we'll get the others answered in the email, like I mentioned. So from a staffing and recruitment background, has it been challenging to manage your pipeline of professional line concierge staff?
Actually, it hasn't. It's
No.
been quite easy to recruit people, and I honestly, we, you know, at first it was like, okay, you know, I can recruit people in Portland. That's fine. I can, you know, build relationships with those people. I can vet them. But then I was like, okay, how are we going to do this in a city that we, you know, haven't even been in? And it was actually people are wanting to do this, and it's convenient for them. It's, you know, flexible. It works with their schedules. And there's a lot of people in the gig economy already. So, you know, you just have to find those groups of people who have been Uber drivers or Postmate delivery folks who still want to do these kinds of gig type jobs, and find that, you know, waiting in line is a great way to make some extra income. So it's been quite easy to recruit these folks.
That's awesome. All right, so we're out of time, and I want to thank Yalda and Shahrzad so much for joining us today. For our event attendees, next month we have a special extended event in celebration of International Women's Month. We'll be featuring 3 women from different sort of areas of the tech sector. So registration for that event is live at techoregon.org/events, and I'll send a registration link out with the feedback survey for today's event. Thank you both so much for sharing your story. It was awesome to learn more. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and have a great rest of